Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Amara Samata and I am going to be speaking to you today about something that is really dear to my heart. It's one of the most precious experiences that we can have in relationship to being a human being, and that's what I call awakening, or a kind of spiritual opening, or Kundalini Rising, especially within modern times. And I hope in this video I can give you some basics around the ethics of awakening. If you are a space holder, if you are a facilitator or a practitioner, somebody who is working with these processes that lead to the inevitable awakening, realization of a human being of their true intrinsic nature. And on the other side, I'm going to be talking about the essentials, the real basics. It's a big topic, and I've decided it's time I'm going to make an online program that talks about this in depth so you can have more understanding about the awakening process, what goes on physically, emotionally, mentally, and energetically. I've come to realize there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and there's just a lot that's not really known about this. It's nobody's fault. There's no one to blame. It's just how it is right now. And I was fortunate enough to have this amazing experience of what's called awakening within the guidance of two very amazing beings. One of them was a Filipino mystic and modern day sort of, healer and illuminator, accelerator, awakener. And he took me into a process that did give me the opportunity for what we call an opening to a greater perception, and all that has done for my life. And at the same time, I was being guided daily in this process by a woman who was ordained as a lama in the Dzogchen tradition through Mahayana under Sakya Tenzin, and she was guiding me in what is more along the lines of what we might call the higher teachings or Tibetan Tantra, and helping me to make sense of what is happening to me. Because when this process began for me, I wanted to know what is happening to me. I felt like I was going to die. I felt like I was going to go crazy. And these are hallmarks of awakening. And so I'm going to show you how you can navigate this terrain, hopefully today with some points here, some really good tips on if you're having this experience, or if you know someone who's having this experience, or you work with people that might be having similar experiences and you don't really understand what is happening to you, what is happening to them. Hopefully I can shed some light on this subject where it's just really, really needed. There's just a real lack of resources for this out there. So here we go. All right, if you are what I call a space holder, you might even be more than that, but at the very least, you are somebody who's holding space, or maybe you're even providing a practice or a process to others that has the potential to lead them into the opportunity for awakening. So this is going to be, if you're offering something up, this can be if you're a yoga teacher, if you are, a Reiki practitioner, if you're a theta healer, if you are a sound healer, if you're an intuitive healer, an energetic worker, or healer, if you are a breath worker, these kinds of processes, if you work with Osho work or any kind of meditation at all, actually, we can sometimes think that, you have to look at what is it that the whole process, if the yoga, the meditation, the asana, the deep practice, all of it, what what is it practice for? Stage for. And it could very well be that in your class or in your workshop, and I know that some of you out there have had this experience where one of your clients or one of your students, something starts to happen. They start to shake, or they start to cry or laugh, or they have this huge epiphany that they're God, and it can get a little disconcerting, but you got to know that what you were offering was moving people towards this opportunity. And so I'd like to help you be more prepared for that. Okay, and then also there's this experience that I've talked to quite a few now, emergency room workers and nurses, where people are coming in and they're having these very profound experiences, and they just don't know what to do with them. They can sense something really amazing is happening, but they're unsure what to do about it. So I am very much interested in speaking to caretakers, especially in the emergency room or in hospital situations where they encounter something like this. And I would love to help you write the code for that. My mother's a nurse. I understand what goes on in those protocol situations. And just like if somebody came in and they were pregnant and you didn't understand pregnancy, and you might think, well, they have a swollen belly and they seem to have a fever or a high heart rate, and so you might give them morphine and antibiotics, which would not be the right protocol for someone giving birth. So when you are giving birth to a higher perception, literally, there are things that we can do to support these people, even if we haven't had the experience ourselves or we don't understand what it is. There are things that you can do, and they very much involve coming at it from a place primarily, first and foremost, that is not in fear. Okay, so let's talk about what happens, and what is going on. And then for you that are seekers, those of you who are wanting, for whatever reason, you're choosing to have, or it seems to be maybe even chosen for you, like maybe you weren't even seeking it, and something started to happen, your energy started to rise, things started to happen to your mind and your heart and your body, your perception, and you don't really understand what it is. Maybe you've been seeking it for a long time and you've had little hints of it, or maybe you even had an awakening and then something seemed to have gotten sort of glitched up. Something has kind of, what I call an awakening, gone sideways. And in this process, two things are colliding, and one is not giving way. It's like trying to stop a freight train. It's going to take a tremendous amount of energy to stop this natural occurring process for coming through. And when we do that, we tend to suffer a lot. So to mitigate the suffering and to just bring it down into a few basic tips I can give you now. Again, this is a really long subject, and I'm happy to work with people individually and in groups and to help them get up to speed on either supporting others in this experience and or supporting themselves. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about Kundalini Rising. Okay, so when we could call it a higher vibration, you could call it prana, chi, the inner winds, the consciousness itself, the energetics of that, when it awakens up within you, it can feel like a rising, it can feel like a descending, or it can feel like an explosion from the center, or all three. So as one of these directions, bottom up, top down, center out, I suppose even out in, is one of these dualistic perceptions, is how you're going to perceive it at first, because your dualistic perception, I'm going to talk about what that is perceiving it as coming from one place and going to another. That's not the full truth, but that's how it tends to be experienced. So in this arising, what I've seen over and over again is the more resistant you are to the energy that's coming through, the more beliefs you have that could put you into a space of fear, out of misunderstanding, the more challenging the experience is going to be. And the more ease that you allow, the more surrender, as we call it, which is trust or faith, courage and commitment that you bring to the experience, just like anything in life, the more easy, effortless, beautiful allowing is going to be. Again, if you're trying to stop a freight train, that's going to be a very messy experience. If you just stand on the sidelines and let it go by, no problem. So as these things come up within you, okay, the density that was embedded in your cells, you're on a cellular level, you have your perception or your consciousness embedded in kind of your blueprint or your structure of your being. Also just literally in the cellular system. So often people will experience something like shaking or kind of thrashing or, all this kinds of movements, which is the body is literally trying to take that dualistic perception. Dualistic perception is what the egoic structure is based on. It's based on separation. It says this and that, and right and wrong, and good and bad, and you and me, and all those things that a survivalistic program needs in order to maintain itself. It has to have a sense of separation. And I'm not saying this is bad or good or not good. I'm just saying this is how it operates. It's survivalistic based. It's designed to keep us alive and to keep us from, getting eaten, getting shot, falling in the way of traffic. It has a sense of that's that, and this is me, and I have to protect me from that. Okay, so when that is undoing itself or expanding itself as it is felt into a more holistic conscious expression, a more holistic perspective, the physical body is going to literally detox out of it that limited perception and sometimes often literally just shake it out until it finds its middle ground. It's homeostasis. So for me, during the awakening process, I in this big rush of energy that came in, I had my body broke out in a rash from head to toe. I was throwing up. I think it was about a day later or something, I began to throw up. I had diarrhea. I had liquid coming out of my ears. I had it was like tears and laughter, and I'll explain that in the emotional component. But there was a huge overall resetting of my system. My whole relationship to my physical body began to shift. My whole relationship to sleep changed. What happened to me in my waking state, in my sleeping state was completely different. How I viewed my body was completely different than how I'd been viewing it before. And of course, all of reality, how I looked at it was completely different. It was like I'd been looking out of a small little tiny window, and then somebody opened up the whole thing, and I said, oh my gosh, this is, that's a big day when that happens. This is nothing to be afraid of. You're not sick. You are resetting your system. Your system has a natural healing, revealing, awakening intelligence about it. And so, of course, if something feels too intense, and it can, and it often does, feel like you're going to die. I want to say right now that people don't die when they wake up, but it definitely feels like that could happen physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically. It can feel like a death because it's a death of a primary perception, conscious way of relating to this experience or to the experience of your reality that is having a huge transformation. And in that, something falls away. That's how we experience it. Something else rises up, and then something else stays the same. It was always there. It was never gone. It's never lost. It has nothing to gain, and there's that aspect. So these three aspects are going to be experienced in some way. So if you see somebody coming in, the worst thing you can do is to try and stop it again. It's like, if somebody were trying to give birth, an awakening feels like a rebirth. That's why we call it rebirthing. You're rebirthing consciousness. Your perception is having a reboot, a rebirth of its more holistic perception. It's unlimited potential. It's unlimited perception. I call it perfection perception, seeing the perfection in all things. You wouldn't want to treat that with, medication. You wouldn't want to diet down. You wouldn't want to stop, you wouldn't try to stop a birth. That would be extremely dangerous. And it can be certainly dangerous. Kundalini awakenings, they say, are dangerous. Well, let me tell you, they are dangerous to the egoic structure. So if you are not interested in having a more freer, more liberated, more abundant, peaceful, joyful, blissful experience, then yes, Kundalini Rising would be very dangerous to you. If you are interested, then, my advice is that whether you wished it upon yourself or whether a bigger part of you kind of usurped you and came in and said, too late, you've been dragging your feet, your higher self or your expanded self, your oversoul, whatever you want to call it, says, time for you to wake up. And if you get hit with it, the worst thing that you can do is be afraid, back up, try to regain a sense of old self. We are evolutionary beings, and you and all your wants and desires, no matter how important they feel to you, are not going to stop human evolution. And guess what? You're a human and you're evolving. And so you're in there with the rest of us, we all are going to start evolving. We're in an accelerated pace of evolution right now. Consciousness is evolving through us, with us, as us. This is going to become more and more normal to see people falling into their natural states of being. Okay, so that's the physical aspect. If you're with somebody, make sure that they are as safe as they can be, comfortable. The scary parts are not necessarily the physical parts, although it can feel like for some of you that will be the scary part. The most scary parts are usually the emotional and the mental components of awakening, and that's where people really become afraid. In the emotional component of awakening, this is a reset, again, a rebirthing, a rebooting, a re-understanding, rewiring of your emotional capacity. So we have an emotional system, and then we have a way that we feel about our emotional system. So it can get a little confusing. Just really quickly, our emotional system is our natural guidance system. It naturally guides us towards a more harmonious, evolved, evolutionary expression. It's those times in life where, you see something that is not congruent with your higher truth or your higher values, and so a tear comes down your face, down your cheek, and you say, this is something about this is not okay. It's the times where you become impassioned about something you're really passionate about, and that feeling is saying yes to your system. Yes, this is how I want to evolve, and all of the learning curve that's going to come out of that is what that system is trying to move you towards. Those moments where you just your mouth just upturns, and it could be with something simple, or you sigh and you relax back and you smile and you have a sense of peace. You're with someone, or you're looking at a vista, or you're remembering something that's really true and in alignment. This is what your emotional system is meant to guide you towards. When we have a lot of stories around those emotions, and we tell ourselves what those emotions mean, and we do that from a more limited perspective, then those emotions can cause a lot of discord and discomfort and confusion. and even suffering, can occur from when our thoughts and our emotions mix together and they're not coming from the highest place. So often during a awakening, you will have a huge reset and an emotional outburst will come. This is where the awakened being begins to laugh and laugh and laugh. I laid on the ground outside of my condo in the rain gutter and was just laughing and sitting in pure ecstasy at the beauty of water and flowers, the miracle of life that I had been ignoring. I had been taught to sort of ignore and put to the side because other things were more valued in my upbringing other than the miraculous experience of life itself. So there can be like a laughing that happens, this beautiful, amazing, my partner and I call it just the ridiculousness of existence. It's like hilariously ridiculous. It's the cosmic joke. It's when you find what you were seeking and it was you, and you thought it was that. You thought it was the guru or that statue or that imagery or that mystical experience or that whatever it was that was out there, that other than me, seeking of something outside of yourself. And I'm not saying there isn't something that we could call outside of ourselves. At least if you have a self, there's definitely that. But while you're seeking it, when it becomes integrated, and you realize it is a part of you, you're a part of it, there's an interconnectedness to it, and the unity of all things happens, not as a concept, not as like, oh yeah, everything is everything and all is one and that's cool. Not like that, but from a genuine experiential experience, then all these emotions can come out. One of them is great delight and laughter at the nature of all of reality. There's also the experience of the grieving process that's going to come for all the times that you wasted time not being awake. And this creates this beautiful sadness that's very authentic, and you can really be grieving humanity and how we've sort of lost sight of what was true and what was loving and what was wise and kind, and all of this kind of outpouring of emotion. You can cry at the smallest things. I helped facilitate an awakening in my workshop, and the woman that had the experience of awakening came and she was crying over, I think, ice cream that she'd never really stopped to taste the beauty. I think it was vegan ice cream too, which was kind of cool. And she'd never stopped to taste, the beauty of what it really, really was on one hand. And on the other hand, it didn't taste the same. It didn't give her that soothing thing anymore. It was empty of its essence. It was nothing. It wasn't even what she had thought it was. And so she was grieving that, and she was laughing and she was crying in her ice cream at all this like epiphanies that were going off about what she thought it was and what it really was and what it wasn't, and how all of life had been like that for her. And so that was a big moment. That's a big day for you when your heart has an awakening into the unity of what is. I describe it also very simply. Metaphor is like if you thought you were a finger and then you wake up to the fact that you're a whole body. Finger is very sort of limited in what it can do, but when it's attached to a whole body, suddenly, it's like becoming the universe. And it can feel like that. You're giving birth to something brand new, to huge, to big. You can also become very enraged at all the times that you didn't see it, at all the times other people didn't see it. And it gets very tricky here because and this is what I'm going to talk about in the program, is really the refined details of not allowing the egoic structure to come in and claim the awakening as theirs. To claim that compassion as yours, that wisdom, that oneness, because that separation coming in and trying to take the realization as its own, and then you create what's called a really big spiritual ego, which is, there's nothing inherently wrong with a big spiritual ego. It has a lot of mastery in it, actually. It's just that it's not liberation. So if you're going to, out of a sense of fear, out of a sense of habit, kind of pull back and say, the quickest way to lose your enlightenment is to say, I became enlightened, or I got it, or aha, there it is, I finally did it. As soon as you insert the I of your identity back into the process, you just limited it. But for some people, that's going to feel safer than what happens if it fully is allowed to fully birth. But allow yourself to have these emotions, and don't be afraid of somebody who is, laughing at the beauty of reality, who is sobbing at the beauty of reality, the perfection of all things. Somebody who is grieving all the times that they weren't aware of who and what they truly are. This is just like a grieving process, of somebody who died. You don't need to, often we medicate people who are going through grieving, and grieving is a necessary component of a deeper realization. And again, the more you allow that realization to blossom within you, the more that those emotions are going to subside and come back into their natural ability to guide you in life in a very responsible way. Okay, so that's just a little hint about things that can start to happen to you emotionally. Now let's get into the really tricky field of what happens when you wake up mentally. So the body, again, has its own reset, its own embodiment that it's going to take on, and there are things you can do to help prepare your body for that experience. The emotional system, there's things that you can do to prepare your emotions for that experience as well. But again, however it happens, whether it's gradual for you in kind of a step-by-step experience, whether it kind of comes in big chunks forward and a few steps back and then blasting again and a few steps back and blasting again, we call that skipping the grades. If that's your style, there's things you can do to support that. And if it happens, which is a little more rare, all at once in one big blast, those people, if they keep going all the way with it, it tends to, again, it has a natural intelligence. It takes care of itself. So primarily I'm working with those that are experiencing it in chunks, and they're not really sure what that means. So in the mental experience, this is where we get into the wisdom aspect. So there's the embodied aspect, there's the compassionate aspect, or the loving aspect, the fullness, the unity, the oneness, the all-oneness. And also I'll say there, as you're moving into that, and you need two to have an awakening. One, it's good preparation, but you need to get at least two legs to stand on, they say. Otherwise, you're sort of limping along with this great compassion, but not a lot of wisdom to go with it, or this great wisdom, but you need compassion to go along with it. So these two together are required to have a sustainable, or at least the opportunity for a sustainable awakening, even for awakening itself. Otherwise, it's called more like a taste of awakening. You've had a sampling of one of those two aspects. And then there's the embodied aspect, okay? And all the things that it's going to do to you physically. And nobody who's gone through it would go back to the old way of living. There are those who it's just that transitional period that can get really tricky where you kind of want to back out. And so I've helped a lot of people with this and understand this, and there's a graceful way to do it. You can put up your hand and make a request to the universe and say, hey, I'd like this to be more graceful. Okay, so in the mental aspect, this is where you really, the mind opens. It can literally blast open. You can feel things happening to the crown of your head, to your third eye, and things open up to what we call the empty aspect of truth. It's the nothingness. It's the great void. It's the it's that empty quality that allows all things to ironically exist. So in that aspect, as the identity begins to fall away from itself as a separate thing, and it's going to now move into the void, we could call the compassion aspect as kind of moving into the light. And both are somewhat like maybe the yin yang. There's a lot more teachings about that, but it's this cohesive, holistic, triune perception. And the Trinity is the everything, which is we're all, again, this is not a concept. So I'm saying things that are concepts. I'm talking about the real experience, which is very different. Your dualistic mind cannot conceptualize awakening. It's not possible. So it's different than what you're imagining, but you can still use your imagination to prepare you for it. It's like looking at a picture of the sun. Is not at all going to inform you about what it feels like to stand in front of the sun if you've never felt sun before. You can't imagine heat and sunlight and these things that are coming just from imagination, from a circle on a piece of paper that's maybe painted yellow. It's not going to be the same thing. But you can still use that as a map. It's not a problem. So as the mind begins to awaken into this great void, there are some classic hallmarks, and this is where most people get hung up. So I'm going to talk about these right now. Really note these down, because you might be seeing them in yourself or other people, and I'm going to show you how to just clear this up so there's not so much misunderstanding and fear around what happens to the mind during awakening. Okay, so one of the qualities is meeting this sense of great emptiness. It's like in the heart, you'll come across this terrain of loneliness, overwhelming loneliness before the awakening. It's kind of like a firewall, testing, are you courageous enough? Even if no one can ever meet you deeply again, because this is the fear. I'm going to be all alone in this experience. It's going to be very isolating, and that's of course not true at all, but it's one of the protections that comes up from the egoic program. So the mind will tell you three things, predominantly three things that it's going to try and sort of scare you out of the experience. I call this the dragon and the peacock. The dragon is very much, it's all about aversion. It's all about, no, I don't want to do that. It's all about fear. And again, you're going from a fear-based perception, conscious awareness that's predominantly fear-based, ignorance-based, apathy-based, into its truer nature, which is love-based, compassion-based, and wisdom-based. So as you move into this darkness, there's many things that can happen, but these three fears will arise to some degree to each person, depending on how they're wired and how their whole belief structure works. So the first fear is, I'm going to die. And your mind will literally tell you, again, whatever I am is going to die. And why that is the egoic process does, it feels like it's going to die. The sense of I, my identity. And if you have a very strong identity of yourself as anything, as anything at all, as a mother or a teacher or a victim or a hero or a bad guy or whatever you've decided you are, you were told you were, and you adopted that identity, the bigger the identity, the harder it falls. So that fear of losing yourself, I feel like I'm losing myself. People will say that. I feel like I don't know who I am anymore, or it feels like I'm going to die. These are all assumptions. They're not actual feelings. They're assumptions the mind is making about a feeling that's happening in your system. So it's a tricky process because you're allowing yourself to feel the sensations of that would usually cause us to pull back to go into fight, flight, freeze kind of mentality. So this is why it requires surrender. I mean, I know you guys have heard that word, what is surrender? What are you surrendering into? And this is what my teacher used to tell me. It helps a lot. You are surrendering into you, into your greater expression of you. You're not surrendering into the other, into unknown, into darkness, into dissipating into nothingness. You're not surrendering into something other than you. It's just you becoming more of you. And again, that's really tricky because I don't mean that in an egoic identified way. Not like you becoming the best Amara that I can be. I'm not interested in egoic upgrades. The awakened process is not interested in making Amara like really awesome or cool or professional or successful, or respected. Those are all beautiful qualities in the egoic spectrum. And I'm happy to work with people who are interested in those experiences. There's nothing wrong with them. But the awakening process is not interested in a, self-help, self-upgrade from the small self point of view. It's interested in connecting to its full perspective in human design, consciousness coming through in a liberated expression, and all of the great potential and all of the great experiences that can come from that. And all I can say is that nobody I know who's gone through an awakening and really had the courage to face it would ever turn it back in for how they were perceiving, acting, believing before. Okay, so it will tell you I'm going to die. Nobody dies when they wake up. Okay, your body stays. Your bodies aren't designed to die. Hearts and minds. What's dying is a perspective. Okay, so relax. 2, it will tell you I'm going to go crazy. You're going to go insane. If you keep doing this, you're going to go crazy. You're going to go insane. And this is where it gets tricky. Yes, if the egoic structure continues to hold on to the illusion of what it is, if it refuses to look at the truth of reality, it can go crazy for a little while or for a long while, depending on how long you want to hold on to that. Just like anything that's evolving. Imagine if you were growing up and you're a baby, and then you start to see that you're not a baby. You're actually becoming a young adult, and that you for some reason freak out and you want to remain a baby. You're going to really go crazy in that experience. There's something that wants to be seen and realized and experienced, and you don't have to go crazy to receive that. Again, it takes a refined sense of commitment and a lot of compassion towards yourself and understanding how the egoic structure works. So a lot of things will come up to scare you away from this process. It's just, why that happens. It really goes back to how we're parented, how we're raised in this world. And that goes back to what happens before we even come into this world. So it's a long subject, but let's just say at least in these lifetimes, how we are raised is not conducive to nurturing our natural, holistic, expanded, empty perception. We're not encouraged to do that. We have it with us, and it takes a lot of energy to shut it down and to repress it. And we've been raised primarily in a sit down, shut up, be quiet, behave yourself society that doesn't respect the miraculous curiosity that we're all born with, that would naturally lead us into our divine reality. Okay, so if it's not telling you I'm going to die, and it's not telling you I'm going to go crazy, the third thing is it tells you is some fear that is particular to you. And this is usually around Again, I'm going to be lonely. It's going to be boring. People aren't going to understand me. I'm going to be ostracized. I'm going to lose my partner because I'm going to switch, expand so much they're not going to know who I am, and these kinds of things. And again, yes, it's true that sometimes, often, there is a falling out. When your vibration expands so much, there are going to be those who are going to choose not to be part of that elevated vibration that you're now going to offer out into the world. Some people will rise up with you, and some people will move away. But when you see the perfection of all that is happening, you have nothing but divine compassion for them and their process. There's no winners or losers. And although it can require some grieving for the choices that others will make, and for how you express yourself and experience yourself after that, there will be some shifts for sure in your life. But they're all within a very responsible, respectful spectrum if you're really looking at it clearly. Okay, so if the dragon doesn't get you, then you get hit with the peacock. So the peacock is the temptations. They're the clinging. So the other one is the aversion, and the other one is the clinging, the wanting, and the desire. And the peacock comes in during the time of awakening. And again, these are things that you can be feeling just on the inside and knowing as a reality or afraid they might be true on the inside. They can also be coming from the outside. So people can be saying to you, oh, you're going crazy, or stop that, you're going to die. And their fears can be also illustrating, these sort of dragon and peacock aspects. The dragon and the peacock, by the way, have positive sides as well. I'm talking about their unconscious aspects. They also have conscious aspects. So that's another teaching. So the peacock comes in and it says, it goes deep into the hardwired desire aspect of the egoic system. It says, wait, don't wake up. I have a better idea. This is going to be fun. You can become really like famous, notoriety, adored, accolades of some kind are going to come in as an idea that you can now take this energy and use it, to kind of be a hero or save the world. This is your feeling of, I am God, I can save the world. And the truth is, to some degree, that's true. Yeah, you are God, you're the universe, you're all of it. And you're also none of it. And you're also something very specific that is some of it. And those three, again, it's like a triadox of realization, are all working together, ideally harmoniously, when they're allowed to do so. And then if you need to be famous and successful in that way, it will naturally occur. You won't need to stop it, and you won't need to grab onto it. So fame will come in. The second thing is fortune will come in. And then the third thing is something that's particular to you. It usually has to do with around sexuality. Like you will become really sexy, or you can have this kind of a heightened sexual experience. And I've seen so many times, I can nail it like clockwork. When you're going through an awakening, somebody will come into your life at right around that time, and they will offer you $1 million to start up your company, to do your big mission thing, whatever it is. And it's not that funding isn't important. It's just that if you're gonna not take it fully into its expression, you're still not going to be free. It's not the $1 million opportunity that comes in right around the time of awakening, just a little before. Some people experience it a little after it or during it. Then, the most beautiful woman, or, the hottest guy, the coolest guy comes in, and suddenly there's this it's like, you can have this, it's like in the game shows, you can have this full liberated experience, or here's this great guy, you know, maybe you want to get wrapped up in that relationship, and it's okay. These things eventually, you can't elude the inevitable. It's inevitable for us as a species, and it's inevitable for you, whatever we could call it, you. At some point in space and time, your you is going to have this experience as long as humanity continues to be what it is. So my advice is to, wait, be patient, give yourself some time, put yourself in a place where you can really nurture this experience, and not in these moments of temptation, whether they're coming to you from the outside or they're rising up from the inside. Not grab onto them, not hold on to them as something that you can claim as yours. If you need to be rich or famous or abundant or sexy or any of those things in the awakened experience, then you will be, because it has its own, again, natural intelligence, and it will do what it needs to do for the all, for the sake of the all. It's always operating for the sake of the all, not for the sake of separation. Okay? If you don't need to be those things, you won't be, and it will not be a big deal in the slightest. Okay? So these are the trappings that come up. Often there are many things that the mind can throw at you. When the mind detoxes itself, it goes into kind of a human collective experience, and all the negative and the positive often come rushing up. And so I was trained in my teaching, just, not to touch it. Don't touch it. So if you start to have these hellacious visions in your mind of just the most horrible things that human beings could possibly do to each other in this realm or in any way or in any place, don't make the mistake of that being some kind of something's gone wrong and some kind of, sorry, my phone is dinging, some kind of mistake that's happening. Just know that it's like a detox process in the mind. And these are things to just be, allow them. You don't need to push them away. They will dissipate naturally over time. And the less you react to them, and the more you stay in just the truth of what you are, whatever that feels like to you, it can feel like being hugely expanded, or it can feel like being a small center little point, or some of both. Just let those, sort of sort themselves and detox themselves out. Same thing, if you're having amazing experiences, blissful experiences, if you're seeing things shift in your perception, if you're seeing, matrix codes, or if you're seeing sacred geometry, if you're seeing rainbow colors or colors that didn't exist before, if you're seeing other worlds or other dimensions, if you're seeing angels, if you're hearing the sounds of the universe, all these things I've seen, I've experienced. Don't grab onto them. Don't make them something. Don't create a story about them. Don't tell yourself, now that's it, I've found it. It's like one of my favorite little cartoons is these three little Buddhist monks together, young little Buddha boys, and they're meditating, and one of them says, "Enlightenment, oh yeah, booyah, I'm the first one, I got it." And the other two are like, So whatever your amazing experience is, your like spontaneous explosion of light language, or ma, or even words that are just amazingly profound, whatever they are, you can still use them. They can be used for the benefit of others, but don't mistake them as some some itness. As one of my heart teachers says, if you think you've found anything, keep going. So this is just a really basic overview of the things that could happen to you physically, emotionally, mentally, and then again in the energetics, or what people like to call the spiritual component. There's all kinds of things that are just sort of sensed or felt, and you may have like I had instant kind of clairvoyance, clair audio, all these clair things that that I've experienced, whatever their names are, it's natural to see beyond, to experience the beyond. And there's even what's beyond the beyond. So just trust that it is an upgrade to your human, conscious, evolutionary perspective. It's definitely worth the journey. So if you are, again, wanting to understand more about this, I teach an 11-day facilitators training course that really is designed to provide really output very responsible people with a very high standard for holding sacred space, for creating and offering modalities that bring people into the truth of who they are, and for the experience of that themselves. And let's see, what's the last thing that I'll say about this? If you start to become afraid, a really good question you can ask to somebody else who you're holding space for is just, is it true or is there more? Take a look and see. Trust that you can see that realization. You know, you can realize it. It's okay to look at it. It's okay to open it up. Nobody has ever gone into the experience of revelation, of realization, awakening or actualization, and discovered, oh my God, it's true, I'm not good enough. Oh my gosh, it's true, I need to protect myself because there's things that are that are scary, and I need to somehow keep myself back because it's not okay to be me, or it's this world is not okay, or something is really wrong with this. These are all misperceptions. And of course, I'm not talking about just basic logical things. It doesn't mean you're going to start walking out in the middle of traffic. Practice, if you're starting to feel expanded to the point where you can fly, you can walk on water, I say, practice that first before you you take it to an extreme level. And again, if anyone is doing something that seems dangerous to their body, often, this is crazy, but people could feel like, I can fly. I asked so many people, hundreds and hundreds of people I've worked with, what happens if you were free? And almost all of them say, I could fly. We're remembering the time when we were not embodied, and consciousness was allowed, to move and to flow outside of a body experience. And it feels like flying, and we want to fly. It doesn't mean that you need to jump off a building. If you woke up to the reality of what was, it wouldn't occur to you to test yourself against yourself, because there is no self in that way. Okay, so I'm just going to end with that. I am inspired to create a program about modern awakening. The feminine style of awakening, how that's different from the masculine style of awakening, awakening inside a lineage, outside of a lineage, and all the pluses and minuses of both of those. And so do keep up with me, and I'll be announcing that online course soon. If you are interested in having me speak to your community, I'm open to that. I'm working with communities in other countries now. And if you're interested in talking to me in a private session and working through some stuff, I do that as well. And I also work individually with people and help really anchor what is happening in them on all levels of being within what I call the self-mastery, which is more along the egoic mastery spectrum. And I also work with people on the divine spectrum, which is the awakened self, or the divine self. There's another spectrum as well, but those are the two spectrums that I primarily work with people on. So if you're interested in all things ascension, awakening, which, by the way, awakening's byproducts are healing to some degree. Whatever's best for the all will arise up within you. There have been awakened beings who were not particularly healthy, and that was the most beautiful showing of compassion for them and their community and their world at that time. There are other ones that are very healthy, and that's the most beneficial outcome. So many things can happen to you. Don't assume that you're gonna float in the air and become this like perfect in a certain way kind of being. You'll be whatever you need to be for the sake of all involved, including yourself. Okay, it's a beautiful process. I'm here for you. I hope this has brought some light to some aspect of experience you've been wondering about, or maybe you've been experiencing yourself. And again, there's a lot more that we can talk about, so much more that happens within this processes, and really refining this into a lifestyle that becomes what is. Be patient with yourself. One of my teachers used to say it shouldn't take more than 12 years of concerted effort to wake up. It took me 13 years. I was a little bit slow. But I've known people who've done it in 4 years and 7 years, and it's not it's not something that's done. It's something that spontaneously, naturally arises, and then what's left of you is the refinement. It's a lifestyle. It's an awakened way of being that's constantly in presence, living with itself, in its truth, and evolving itself in that experience, seemingly eternally. I thank you, I love you, and I wish you nothing but perfection.